What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Shred Show Live. It's my favorite day of the week. It's Wednesday, but it's Operation VA, and you can see I've got so many incredible guests hanging out with me. Plus, Brittany and Megan, they make me and Brian look even better than we normally do, so I cannot complain. But today, we're talking about something, frankly and honestly, I had no idea about. But the more that I researched it, I am so excited to talk about PCS, navigating the PCS season. What does PCS stand for? You're about to find out. You're about to get educated, and you are not going to want to miss this episode. Ladies and gentlemen, volume up, tag your veteran friends, share this to your veteran groups, because you are literally not going to want to miss this episode. Are you ready? Are you ready? It's time to shred. I am literally so excited for today's episode because we have two incredible guests. Brian and I do this show, Operation VA, every single week, and we really bring the things that you need to know for our veteran community. We truly try to serve our veterans, those who have served so valiantly, so heroically. We try to bring a little bit of education to our mortgage space, and anything that we can do, we just feel humble for. But we have two very, very special guests today. We have Megan Harless, who Megan actually received the 2020 Military.com award for Spouse Changemaker of the Year, which is super, super cool. And then Brittany actually received the 2017 award. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Brittany, but it was the Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouse of the Year. So both of these ladies are they're award winners themselves. They have done so much to serve the veteran communities. And I'm so excited to be talking about this. And I'm going to let Brian kind of take the helm on this one because, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to get educated myself because I didn't really know what the PCS season, I didn't know. We have military friends. I didn't know when they were moving and shifting and going different places that this was an actual thing. So Brian, today we are talking about PCS, which for those who don't know, I'm going to sound really educated right now, is the permanent change of station when it comes to military. But why is this such a big deal, Brian?
Well, it's basically military relocation, right? So one thing about the military community, and Megan and Brittany will obviously, beat this to a pulp in this conversation, but every 3 to 4 years, military families are always relocating, right? And sometimes it's not even 3 to 4 years. It might be 2, depending on personal situations, promotions, etc. The military itself is, it is relentless when it comes to relocation, right? It's, it's always about the needs of the military. And sometimes maybe, if you're lucky, the needs of the family. It just is what it is, and everybody signs up for it. But what I think why this is the perfect time to have these two phenomenal human beings on this show to talk about it is because we are in a competitive market. We are an extremely competitive market. We already know that our realtors that are out there fighting the good fight, and our mortgage professionals who are out there fighting the good fight, are having challenges already getting military families and veterans into homes just based on the VA home loan benefit itself, right? The challenges that possesses. Now you take into this the PCS process, the relocation piece, military families moving from one part of the country all the way to the next. And I think why this is important for all our mortgage professionals and realtors who are watching this, or who should be watching this, need to know and understand some of the things that these families are going through during this process, and how they can take some of the tips and feedback that Brittany and Megan are about to share with them on how to better serve this community, so they know, hey, listen, I have a military family relocating from X, Y, and Z. This is what I need to do to ensure that I set them up for success.
That is such a good point, and I'm excited to dive into this because there are things that we need to know as mortgage professionals as they're making these changes. So let's dive into this. But before we do, Brittany and Megan, I want to get to know both of you a little bit more. Like I said, you both have these accolades that I could talk about for I'm the entire show. But how did you both get started in this? Megan, let's start with you. I mean, you're a military spouse, but what made you say hey, I want to get involved with this? What made you kind of start with all of this?
So I got involved with PCS reform. I work in the advocacy area, and I call it accidental advocacy. It wasn't something I was going out and looking for, getting involved and being a part of. My husband was deployed at the time. I have 3 kids. We have a couple of pets. Life is crazy. already on its own, why not just throw something else on the plate to handle? So back in 2018, we remember we had a really tough PCS move season that summer. It seemed like every story we heard was a horror story of some capacity. Things were showing up broken, damaged, not showing up at all, just a slew of issues. And so I had a blog site that I had wrote an open letter on that was basically a military family's grievance to the PCS process, that we wanted better service. We wanted our stuff to show up. We didn't want it to be broken. And filing a claim should not be the answer to every issue that a military family has. So I posted this. My husband was deployed, like I said, and somebody said this would make a really great petition. So I turned it into a change.org petition, posted the link with my open letter. It was posted on a Friday and totally expected it to like die off in internet land somewhere over the weekend, and that completely did not happen. It went viral within the next couple of days. I was talking to various reporters and media outlets about what was going on. I had people from Congress calling me, some of the defense fellows saying, hey, how can we get our senator involved in this? I had calls randomly from people at Transcom saying, hey, what is your purpose with this? And so seeing the attention that it was getting and seeing that all of the families that were sharing it and putting their own stories into it made me realize that this really is a big issue. It goes across the board with all branches, with every location, regardless of rank, people are having issues with their move. And so once I saw the, this kind of take off and momentum that it had, I felt this responsibility to kind of see it through and to make sure that we were going to get the good changes we needed. And it wasn't just going to be lip service from whoever it was to, oh, we'll look at this, it'll be okay, and just let it fall off at the wayside. I felt that responsibility to make sure that we kept the attention on these issues and that we followed through with getting the solutions that families really needed with it.
Wow. So, I mean, you already have a ton on your plate. Your husband's deployed. You're like, hey, give me one more thing. Just toss it on. I might as well. Brittany, I know you've been a military spouse since 2005 as well. Do you have a similar, I'm sure most of us, like in the mortgage space, none of us planned on like, hey, I want to be a mortgage professional for my life. I'm super excited for that. I'm sure you didn't expect to be a military spouse, but how did you get involved in the space as well?
Oh, man. So we just actually wrapped up last year, our 10th move in 15 years. So
Whoa.
A lot of moves, but I really got in this space because I'm a serial advocate for military families. Like, it's just one thing after another. Where can I advocate for military families? And then also, I kind of pride myself on being a community connector to where I want to take the military family and veterans and connect them with the resource, tool, or service that they need. And so 3.5 years ago, after the award process and representing Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouse of the Year, this guy on the screen, Brian, said, hey, come over to Caliber. And I was like, you're crazy. I don't know anything about the mortgage business. And he said, I don't need you to know about the mortgage business. You know military families, and you live this and you have the experience. So that's really how I became an advocate for military families moving. I'd been through it so many times, and I had my grievances like Megan, but really just kind of thought this is the way it is, and it's just going to be this way for military families. So that's how I accidentally got into this environment.
See, we all fell into it, but now it's like our passion, like both of you have shared, it's become so much more than that. And again, moving that many times, I thought, like, I've moved, I think 3 times. I've been married for 12 years now. I've moved 3 times, and I'm like, that's a lot of moves. So I don't know how you military families do it. I have so much respect just in that regard, like going from place to place to place. I'm like, and I've got to ask, is it hard? Is that like difficult on you mentally, physically, emotionally? Is it hard on families? I mean, tell me a little about that before we get in. I know there's so much to talk about, but is that a hard transition?
Yeah, it's definitely, you ask anybody, it's definitely a hard transition. And then throwing kids into the mix of it, it just makes it even harder. Essentially, when we move every 1, 2, 3 years, we are starting our lives all over again. We are having to find new schools for our children, a new house to live in, a new community, new medical providers, new grocery store, new softball coach or gym or whatever for our children and their extracurriculars. And so it is definitely a very stressful time to be moving so much and so often, and then again with our children, helping them make those transitions, and really caring about them. And sometimes we let ourselves go and we'll go cry in the closet later, but focusing on our children and making sure that transition from a school that they loved, where they had all their best friends, moving into a new school, not knowing how long it is we're going to be there, having them feel iffy about making new friends because they know we're moving again. So there's a lot of stress into those transitions, and it definitely is a very, very hard process for families to go through so often.
This is one of those. Go ahead, Brittany. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I would, and Megan can understand this, and probably Brian too. One thing with military families, if you have kids, we've all been there, especially as a military spouse, when you get to a new location and you're like scoping your neighborhood and people, and you're like, who has a car that could get all of their kids and my kids in case of an emergency, and I can put them down as my emergency contact because I don't have any family or friends nearby. And that's something that military families experience in every move. And it's like this speed dating other military families to find that person.
Well, I would say that's one of those things where you guys really do, like, again, like I mentioned, our friends, the Gelsonons, I'll shout out to Stephanie and James because I've seen them go through those changes. But it seems like the community of veterans, because they've lived on military housing before, they haven't lived on military housing, but especially like you're talking about, Brittany, when you don't, as you're moving into these neighborhoods, they're typically neighborhoods where, again, there are other veteran families. And so there is this sense of community, of like camaraderie, friendship, support more than anything. So, and I'm not saying that transition is easy. Again, my level of appreciation and gratitude for all military, especially military spouses, continues to grow because, again, I can't imagine what you have to continue to go through. That this is just one more sacrifice for everybody out there. You got to keep these little things in mind. Not only are you guys, our veterans, protecting our country, serving our country, but what you put your families through is just absolutely incredible. So on that note, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about navigating the PCS season. And Megan, you were talking about this a little bit. There actually is a season for this. It begins kind of in May, ends in August. So talk a little bit about what the PCS season is and when it runs.
Yeah, so the PCS peak, what we call peak season, usually runs from May 15th through the end of August. It's everybody that's trying to move in the summer between school years. That way, again, another easy transition for their children. But of everybody that moves, it's about 42% happens within about an 8-10-ish week period of everybody moving. And so it's a very stressful time within the moving industry and within the military community because everyone is trying to move. We operate on tight, strict timelines. And so having our moving company saying, hey, we can't pick you up on that day, we have to delay a day, when trying to buy a home and they have to delay our closing for one reason or another. I mean, that means, right, we can't do a door-to-door move where they load my stuff up into a truck and drive it directly to my new house and unload it there. Now it's got to go to storage. And there's a whole new piece to that of waiting and getting your things out of storage and getting it delivered. And so PCS process, the season is just very, in the summer, very stressful. And it's a very tight window for a lot of moving pieces to happen.
Well, I was going to say, there's so many pieces. Brian, I want to kind of ask you, we're talking about this. And again, this is so focused on not only veterans, but our mortgage industry as well, the mortgage community. So as loan officers, as originators are hearing this, what are some of the things that they should be thinking about from the lender's perspective, from the originator perspective, and how they should be involved in this process?
Well, I think number one, to Megan's point, and Brittany can attest to this because she's been thrown into the mortgage industry, is I think professionals on the other side need to understand these tight timelines, right? They need to understand that there are go and no-go dates. And, sometimes when we get busy and things become transactional, people forget about what's really going on with this family, right? And there just sometimes could possibly just be a name on the calendar on an estimated closing date. Well, you don't understand that they got household goods coming from across the United States, and this tractor trailer truck's going to show up on the closing date. And if it moves to the right a little bit, now you've just caused a serious disaster for this family, who, by the way, is already stressed out enough. Second item is, even without the moving, understanding when you're talking to a customer who's PCSing, understanding what they're going through, all the stress and everything that they're going through right now, as a professional, taking as much off their plate as possible of this process would be very helpful, right? So like, quarterbacking it, say, hey, I got you. I need you to do this. You send me all this, I'll keep you posted, but we'll be good to go. And, taking a lot of that stress off to them to where they can focus on, getting the kids ready, getting the household goods ready. And it seems weird to me, but almost every circumstance where I've ever heard of a family moving, it's always the spouse is deployed. I don't know. I just feels like everybody moves when the other member of the family is sitting somewhere far, far away, and they're trying to keep that, keeping them involved in the transaction, having your realtor partner maybe Skype with that person while they're walking through the house, you know what I mean? Sending them pictures, keeping them involved or her involved in the transaction also helps too, because, it keeps everybody with equal, equitable distribution of responsibilities with the process, right? So it's not just on one person. So right. I just think you have to be very empathetic. You have to understand what's going on to better serve them in the process.
100%. Go ahead. I was gonna say, Brittany, I'm sure you making this change, being a military spouse and then being involved with Caliber, I'm sure you've seen a lot more of this in depth as well.
I have. I mean, I've experienced it myself, but I wanted to reiterate what Bryan said and Megan for the mortgage side. Now that I'm in this side of the house, why it's so critical that there can't be a delay in closing. It cannot be transactional because, like Bryan said, the household goods come on a tractor trailer. Like they're coming, they're going to be delivered. And what the loan officer has to understand is if those goods cannot be delivered, they are put in storage and they can't just be brought out of storage. You're now on a new list that says when another trailer can go pick those goods up from storage and get those delivered. And that could be 2 to 4 weeks after they got put in storage. So now you have a family without household goods, who delayed closing, who now may even have to shell out money to stay in a hotel because they don't have anything to put in their home, or they have to go buy items temporary like air mattresses, towels, and things to have until they can get their goods. So there's really no room for error in the mortgage process when dealing with the military family. That's really critical to know when you're working with one. And right now, and Megan can probably attest to this, what we're seeing is there's a shortage in moving trucks. There's a shortage in the people who are unloading and loading. And so we're seeing a lot of military families separated where the service member is forward moving into the gaining installation and the family is staying behind at the losing installation because there's no one to come pack them up. There's no one to come help get their goods. So we have separated families now living in 2 dwellings, trying to move, buy houses, sell houses. It's big issues right now, particularly that Megan can probably elaborate on.
Yeah, there's definitely there's the truck driver shortage. There's the labor shortage for, as Brittany said, the people loading, unloading, even coming in to pack your homes. There's a shortage in the folks that do that as well. And so, as she said, we're seeing families that are separated because the service member, they still have to go report. They still have to go show up by the date on their orders, or they're counted AWOL, and then there's a whole slew of actions that happen with that. But they've got to show up by their report date. And so if you can't get your family moved onto a truck contracted by the military, a lot of people are also looking at moving themselves, but everyone's moving themselves now. So there's a shortage of U-Haul or Penske trucks to go rent. There's a shortage of pods and the U-Pack containers and everything else to go rent because everybody is doing that. So a lot of people are doing split travel and split movement where their families are staying behind until they can get those movers to come and load up and pack their things. And it's another level of that transition and of that stress.
So, I mean, literally, we're talking about so many moving parts, like from moving trucks to moving people. There's just so much going on. And Bryan, you used a word that is just, I try to really not to force it down people's like mindset and throats, but having empathy in what we do in the mortgage space. Communication is absolutely key. And I mean, military communication is like everything, like giving orders, receiving orders, making sure that things are on time. But taking it into the mortgage space, which we're of course discussing here, you loan officers, you originators, the communication level just has to be stepped up. And that empathy level, understanding, like Megan and Brittany and Bryan are talking about, if things are missed or if dates are missed, there are so many dominoes that start to tip over. And like, I can't even imagine, again, I don't mean to keep beating the dead horse here on this, but you're already going through a lot of stress. You're having to move your family to a new neighborhood. You're going to this new area you're not used to. But now you have the stress of like, is my moving truck going to be here? Like, am I going to be in the house on time? Like all these moving pieces. So all you originators now more than ever, as we're going through this PCS season, need to be aware of that. If you're doing a transaction right now with the veteran family, know that they're probably in this PCS season. So Bryan, as we discuss this, all these originators who are in that pipeline right in the thick of things right now, what are some of the things that should be top of mind to do our best to transition, to make that a little bit smoother for these military families?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is this, mortgages it's not rocket science, right? It's income, assets, and, credit score, and do you qualify, right? So, beautiful thing about a military customer and a veteran customer, I've always said, it doesn't matter how big that list is, just make that list accurate and ask one time, and they're going to get you everything on time. There should be no reason why, you have to keep going back and forth with a customer to continue to get stuff if you've done all the right things in the front, right? And something I always harp on too is, for the love of all that is holy, make sure you get the certificate of eligibility up front, please, because I have seen it time and time again where you get down to the nitty gritty and people are still waiting on getting that. And it could be for a lot of various reasons. I do understand that, right? But just don't let that be your hang up. You got active duty folks, and with active duty, you have to sometimes do a little bit extra work just to get the certificate of eligibility. And just make sure you do that stuff up front, because that's the last thing you want to stop your transaction at the end when you're waiting on VA for 5 days or 7 days or whatever the turn time is, because you have to continue to submit applications to the RLC to obtain that with the right documentation, right? Yep. So little things like that, can really hurt you, and also set this military family back 7 days, which we already heard they don't have 7 days to be set back, right? No. So it's like, you have to really have attention to detail, which is something we talk about in the military all the time. You should have this anyway with any purchase transaction, but I just think your heightened awareness when working with an active duty military family who is relocating should be one step up. Like, you need to step it up, and your realtor partners need to step it up. And you guys can need to work together to ensure that you are checking all the boxes and you're not leaving any rock unturned, and to make sure that everything up front is being done. That way, when it's 3 weeks and a week before closing, you're not sitting there going, oh my God, we need to get this. Yep. Because we know what that means, right? That means because of regulatory reasons and disclosures and all that other stuff, means you're not closing on time.
100%. And that's one of those things too, the COE. I was taught by my mentor, and I'm glad this was like instilled to me in the very beginning when I first started working with veterans, getting that COE up front, getting that as soon as possible, because I saw it. I remember my very first transaction that the COE went bad. I was like, oh, like I didn't have it, and it did throw everything off. I'm like, okay, COE is one of those important things. And Megan, I kind of want to hear from you as we start to wrap things up, as we start to really help people navigate this. Coming from, Bryan mentioned your realtors out there that are working with your veterans, your loan officers, coming from a military spouse, coming from that family who you are working with these, you come from an outside perspective of the industry. What's something for you that has been so critically hey, this was a great, or this is something that really made that experience so much more smooth or so much better when it came to this entire transaction, if you will?
In regards to the real estate community, lenders, the realtors, all of that. So I will be upfront and say we have never bought a home because we move so frequently. We've never stayed at a place longer than 2 years, and we're actually at our current location for a third year, which feels very odd to me. I feel like my house should be getting loaded on a truck right now, and it's not. But for me, in our experience, when we've used realtors and used the real estate community, it was always just them understanding our situation. It was always them just knowing what it is that we needed and why. And so, for instance, we used a realtor to find our home, our rental home in Virginia, because the market there was hot. Everything I saw that I liked was going. It wasn't going to be available by the time that we had moved in. And our realtor like understood, like we were going to be there for a short period of time. We needed to get infused into our community immediately so we could start to feel like it was home and start to feel like we were a part of it. And so having that realtor that just kind of, for me, went above and beyond to make sure we were taken care of. So she made sure that we had a home that met our needs, that was within our budget, which I think is a huge thing. Even when buying a home, I hear a lot of times, my budget is this, and our realtor is showing us houses that are over our budget for this much. Like, I don't understand why, like, it's not possible for us. So I think a realtor really understanding those needs of the military family. And then our realtor that we used kind of, went back a week later, gave us a call after we had moved in and found the perfect home to see if there was anything else we needed. Told us where all the local gems were for restaurants, the kind of those little mom and pop hidden places you don't know about unless you're from there. Our family enjoys hiking. She told us where some of the cool hiking trails were and some of those little hidden gems. And then we were coming up on the 4th of July weekend. And so she told us the places where the different parades were going to be happening at and the different places to go see the fireworks. So that way we weren't trying to scramble and figure out what we were going to do for the holiday weekend. And so those little pieces made it feel like we were already a part of the community and we already belonged there. And that just made the transition for us that much easier.
And Brittany, this is one of those things that, because Megan and Brian have both kind of touched on it, is being the mortgage professional and you being on this side of it now, that extra level of not only communication, but empathy and actually connecting with it. What I love about the veteran community is they're so loyal. If you build that relationship with a veteran family, and if you show that you're not just in it for the transaction, you're in it for them. You're in it to, like Megan said, I want to show you where the great local restaurants are. I want to talk to you about what's going on here, what's going on there. You as mortgage professionals and real estate professionals, Brittany, we have to step up our game, right?
Yes. And I can tell you from being the consumer, like sitting on the consumer side and then now being on the mortgage side, it is critical for you if you want to grow your business. So here's a tip in business development. Community engagement, education is going to equal business development, organic growth. So you do the right thing. If you want to serve the military and veteran community, then when you volunteer in that community, be present in that community, understand them, know their language that they speak, like be engaged with the community that you really want to serve, and you're going to see organic growth. And from a tip to mortgage professionals, I think I would tell all mortgage professionals and real estate professionals, establish expectations early with the client. So it's with the realtors, knowing that the client says, this is my budget. This is what I'm comfortable paying. Please don't show me anything outside of this, because what's going to happen, they're going to fall in love with it, and then they're going to want it, and it's going to stretch their budget, or it's going to be more than they can handle. And with a mortgage professional, we've purchased 3 homes as a veteran family, and one of those, my spouse was deployed. One, we were separated in 2 geographic locations, and then one we were actually able to do together. But establishing the expectation up front when my spouse was deployed, and to say, this is the only time he's available. So you, mortgage professional, don't call me at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning wanting a document when you know I can't get that to you, because I'm telling you up front, this is when my service member is available. This is when I'm available. And if you're willing to do business with me in that time frame and we establish it up front, it's great. But it comes a problem when that mortgage professional says, hey, it's 9 a.m. and I need this from you in 2 hours. And you're like, I already told you up front, my person's sitting in Afghanistan right now or in Iraq. Like, we're not going to get it, the time difference. So that's I think probably the best tip that I could give anyone in this industry is to establish that upfront expectation.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I, one I guess, story of when I worked with a veteran was this exact situation, Brittany. And the reason I was able to do more loans with them, with their family, with other relatives of theirs who are in the space as well, because just what you said, they told me, hey, he is overseas. He can actually talk to you on these times. And again, we had to do the whole power of attorney thing, but she's like, don't even try. And there were things that came up. We all know mortgage process. Brian knows this. We all know this. Things come up that I'm like, hey, I need this right now. But I knew, like she said, hey, you can't even try. Like it's on these days. It's on, I think it was like a Tuesday, Thursday. He's available on this times. And I remember I stood to that schedule because it was so important to her. And that's the only time. Again, he was overseas. I couldn't just pick up the phone. But to her, that was all the difference. She's like, hey, Josh, you listened. All you mortgage professionals, all you real estate professionals, what Megan and Brittany are sharing here is so critically important. You have to listen, just taking that step back, understanding what they're going through. Again, they're about to make a huge change. And like Megan said, whether it's every 2 years, 3 years, or whatever's going on, this has become part of their life. And you have to be willing to adapt to them. You have to take the step back and be the one who is like, you know what? Like Brian said, I'm going to have to make the extra step. I'm going to have to raise my game up a little bit on this, but it's worth it in the end. It's worth it to serve our military families. It's worth it because you get to do something so special. You get to help people achieve that dream of home ownership. So we could go on for we're going on just over 30 minutes now, and we're just starting to scratch the surface of this. But I want to start wrapping things up here, and I want to thank Megan and Brittany, and of course, Brian. This is why we do the Operation VAs, because we get to have incredible guests like Brittany and Megan share some of the things that you need to know, especially about navigating PCS season, whatever it is. We try to share value, not only to all of our veterans out there, but also to our mortgage community. So I want to thank Brittany and Megan. And again, a huge shout out to Brian and Caliber for putting this together. When Brian told me about this, I was like, I don't know what the hell PCS is, but it sounds important. He's got some great guests, so we're going to share it. And now that I know, I feel like this is one thing that Brittany and Megan and Brian have dedicated their lives to, is educating the entire veteran space, and they have dedicated their lives to it. So huge shout out to all of them. Huge shout out to everybody involved. And huge shout out again to all of you veterans who continue to serve so heroically and valiantly. So thank you guys so much. It's been a fantastic show. We're definitely going to have Megan and Brittany on again because, like I said, we just got to scratch the surface with this one. If you guys have questions, comment below. Brittany, Megan, and Brian would love to help answer those questions. If you're a veteran who needs help and you have questions, please message us. Please reach out because we want to help any way that we can. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you. We love you. Now it's time for all of you to go shred, go show up, hustle, repeat every day. We'll see you guys.